So here's your predicament. You want a tough, work-ready ute, but you also need enough room for your family on the inside, and you want a bit of safety and tech in the cabin as well. Obviously, there's Australia's two darling utes, the Ford Ranger and the Toyota Hilux. But what if your budget doesn't quite stretch that far? Well, that's where this thing comes in, the LDV T60 Max Plus. It's more than just a new variant in the range. It's almost like a facelift. It adds an overhauled interior and some major changes when it comes to its technology as well. But is it any good, or is it a story of getting what you're paying for? Well, let's find out.
While it might not look it from a distance, the T60 Max Plus is actually more of a mild facelift than just a new variant, although it will continue to be sold alongside the rest of the popular affordable ute range. The Max Plus also sits atop the T60 range, available in manual, automatic, and as a stretched megatub body style, and yet its price tags are closer to the base model versions of its segment-leading rivals, the Ranger and the Hilux. Its rivals in this lower cost segment of the market are more likely to include the GWM Cannon Ute and the SsangYong Musso, and just like those two, the amount of kit you get for the cash in the LDV is impressive. There are all the usual things like LED headlights and 18-inch alloy wheels, alongside a slew of aesthetic upgrades like its massive sports bar, but the biggest changes are unseen from the outside. The Max Plus is the first T60 to score coil-sprung rear suspension, and it also features an upgraded electric power steering setup. Importantly, it's also the first one to score a more modern suite of active safety items. More on that later.
You've probably noticed by now that the T60 Plus Max looks quite a bit different from the rest of the T60 range, and that's because it gets this new grille, which is to accommodate the new safety equipment under there. But it also gets a slightly tweaked light profile, new wheels, and some new black bits all around the side as well.
The biggest changes are on the inside. Get a load of this crazy redesign. It's almost like a modern EV or something on the inside, and not like the usual tough ute interior you'd get in a car like this. Headlining things are the big 12.3-inch screens running some newish software. There's a sleek piano black touch across the dash, and a wacky raised console piece with a wireless phone charger and new drive selector dial. Meanwhile, the shift stalk has moved to the column here, and there's also a whole bunch of new materials throughout.
Now, with this big cabin redesign has come a few positives and negatives. I'll start with the good stuff first. These screens look nice and sharp, and this area is quite versatile, and there's a lot of storage too. This big center console is really deep. There's all these removable dividers and things, which is really nice to have. And even this center console piece, you can remove this cup holder thing and just take it out if you want, which is kind of neat. And then you've got a nice big storage area down there, and there's also a sliding cover for it as well if you want it to be nice and tidy. I really like the touch of having this wireless phone charger here, which pairs really nicely with that wireless Apple CarPlay as well. But I will say there are a few downsides. Let's get into them really quickly. The first one is the seating position. So this is as low as this seat goes, and as you can see, I'm sitting really far off the ground. It does lend itself to like a nice commanding view of the road, which is especially good when you're traveling off-road or something like that. But it comes with the caveat that the steering wheel is not telescopically adjustable. So imagine if you were taller than me, you'd barely be able to see this digital dash at all. For me, it even crops out the corners, which is a bit upsetting. Now that does bring us nicely to these screens. They're nice and sharp. The wireless Apple CarPlay has worked flawlessly in my time with the car, but there is a bit of a catch. The stock software is really simple. It doesn't have many functions, and you can't even change the somewhat ugly theme of the digital dash in there, which is a bit of a shame. It could use a bit more work to really feel like it matches the rest of the car. Then there's the lack of tactile controls in here. There's a set of touch controls across the dash here. They're okay, and it's nice to have a few shortcut buttons, but it'd be nice to have a dial for fan speed, temperature, and especially volume. In fact, there's no volume dial at all. There's just a toggle on the steering wheel, and that means you have to go into the media app on the car's multimedia system and then use a slider to adjust the volume. There's not even like a swipe out tray like you get on some GWM products. So that's really frustrating if you just need to adjust the volume on the fly, or the passenger wants to adjust the volume at all. Now, all that having been said, this cabin does feel very contemporary, very modern. There's a whole bunch of like nice, well thought out materials across here, and for the most part, it's reasonably comfortable as long as you're my height. Let's go have a look in the back seat. Okay, back seat. So as you can see, I'm 182 centimeters tall, and behind my own driving position, it's pretty good in here. I've got plenty of knee room, the floor's nice and flat, so even that center position might be quite useful for an adult. I've got plenty of headroom back here too, and that can't be said for every ute in this segment. Amenity-wise, you've got large bottle holders in the doors here, a further 2 in this drop-down armrest as well, and then you've got adjustable air vents and a single USB-A outlet on the back of the center console there, and a weird little storage tray, pockets on the backs of the seats as well. There's also a storage area below this rear bench. Now the tray is reasonably well appointed, with a spray-in tub liner saving you that expense, and of course that big sports bar over the top, although it's quite big and intrusive, and I'd almost be inclined to just remove it. There are tie-down points at the front and at the rear, but not in the base, which is worth keeping in mind. And here are the dimensions. See those on your screen now. If you want to see how they compare to this car's most direct rivals, make sure to check out our full written review over at carsguide.com.au.
The T60 Max Plus is also the only version of this ute to get a locking tailgate.
Now you're probably wondering about towing, because what's unique about this version of the T60 is that it gets that multi-link rear suspension instead of leaf springs. But I was surprised to find that it technically does maintain the same 3,000 kilo towing capacity as the rest of the T60 range.
The T60 Max lays claim to one of the most powerful 2-litre diesel engines in its class. See the numbers for that on your screen now.
This bi-turbo diesel engine is mated to a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission with high and low range. It also gets a rear diff locker, but it's automatic and only operates at speeds below 30 kilometers an hour.
It also has a trim claimed fuel consumption of just 8.9 litres to 100 kilometres, although on our test we saw a number a little higher than that despite spending extended time on the freeway during our testing. See that on your screen now.
Okay, so T60 Max Plus, what's it like to drive? Well, if you've driven a ute anytime in the last decade, it'll be pretty familiar. There's good, there's bad, and there's some surprises too. Now the first good thing, especially if you're spending a lot of time driving around a city, is the nice light steering. The Max Plus is the only T60 to get the fully electric steering instead of the standard kind of electrically assisted steering on the rest of the range, and it's nice and light, and it makes this ute feel really easy to steer around tight city streets. Yet at the same time, it provides enough feedback and feel in the corners, and you can have a sense of what the front wheels are doing when you're sort of bouncing around a little bit off-road. Now, usually multi-link rear suspension setups are more comfortable and more suited to family-oriented ute buyers, but I was surprised to find that in the case of this one in particular, it's surprisingly rough and not a whole lot better than a leaf-sprung ute, and that came as a bit of a shock. I thought it would be much better than this, particularly over the rear. Now, it might be like a leaf spring, much better with a bit of weight in the tray, but when you're driving around a city, it is disappointing. Now, this 2-litre engine is pretty powerful. It's not like you want for power, but it's also not as overwhelming as the figures might suggest. And that having been said, I found it doesn't mate quite as smoothly with this ZF automatic transmission as I was expecting it to. It does sort of lurch through the gears, and when you get on a little bit of unsealed stuff, it can feel a little bit rudimentary in the way it transmits the power to the wheels. It's almost like driving a last generation ute in that sense. It doesn't have quite the same smoothness that is built into a lot of modern ute transmissions like you might find in like a Ranger, for example, and the traction control does feel a little bit rudimentary too, but it definitely does what it says on the tin. Those traction systems do seem to have your back, even if it takes them a second to kick in, and that automatic system, which switches it from 2 high to 4 high, does seem to work reasonably well, and that can be a handy thing to have when you're in the wet and on low traction surfaces. The other thing I'll note about the T60 Max Plus is it's surprisingly noisy, and this one has extra sound deadening built into it, so I was really expecting a little bit better. While not a whole lot of noise is transmitted from the wheels to the cabin, even in freeway driving scenarios, I did find that this 2-litre engine is quite loud. On the whole then, it might have plenty of power and be relatively well equipped when it comes to driving gear, but it's not the most refined ute on the market.
The T60 range, excluding the electric ET60, carries a maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating, although it was awarded way back in 2017. This version brings some very welcome active safety enhancements, including auto emergency braking finally, and lane keep assist, alongside adaptive cruise control. And that adds to its existing driver attention alert and 360-degree parking suite.
Now, I was quite worried about the additional safety kit which comes with this version of the T60, because not all these Chinese suites are particularly well calibrated and they can be very annoying when you're just trying to drive around town. But I've got to say, this one is relatively simple, it's not too invasive, and even the adaptive cruise control proved really friendly on our time on the freeway. Now, when it comes to ownership, LDV is a bit of a confusing brand because it offers different terms across most of its range. But in the case of the T60, you get 7 years and 200,000 kilometers of warranty coverage, as well as 5 years of roadside assist.
Frustratingly, there's no cap price servicing program for the LDV T60, so it's a bit hard to tell you how much it will cost to own. You do need to service it once every 12 months or 15,000 Ks.
The T60 Max Plus brings a lot of welcome upgrades to the T60 range, particularly in its safety offering, but it's not without its catches. It does have a few areas where it needs a bit of polish on the inside and with its software. Still, it's refreshingly simple to drive, and for the most part, it does what it says on the tin. What do you think? Would you pick one of these over a SsangYong Musso or a GWM Cannon? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and as always, check out the full written review over at carsguide.com.au.